Okay folks, welcome back to today's episode. As you can see, we are doing another build video. This is my budget PC build. It is an i5 and a GT 80 Ti, GeForce 1080 Ti, so it's not top of the range gaming machine, but it should be enough to play flight sim and some other mid-range games. Either way, let's get started. i5, then we've got the cooler for it with a nice blue LED light, as well as the paste. We then have our Gigabyte motherboard, which supports the processor. We have an M2 hard drive. As you can see, it's actually quite small for a terabyte. We might put an additional hard drive in the future, and we've got 32 gig of RAM, as well as a 1080 Ti graphics card, which was actually second-hand, but it's very hard to get a graphics card at the minute, so this will be powerful enough for what we want to do in the short term. And then the motherboard. So let's get into it with the motherboard. As you can see, it's a nice small motherboard. We have some of the cables. These are for SATA drives. We're not actually using SATA drives, so we can just put those back in the box. This is for the face plate to put on the side, y'all, if you haven't done it before, so you can have a nice face plate if your PC does not have one, then we'll come back and check that later. This is it, the motherboard, the general brains of the computer. We have our memory slots here, so our memory is going to go there. We have some PCI Express cards, so our graphics cards, I might put it down here just to space it out to give it a little bit more heat and a little bit more room from around the CPU, but we'll get into that in a little bit. And then we've got our power as well, fans, etc. So let's get some of these components mounted before putting into the box. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is mount the M2 hard drive. As you can see, it's going to go in first. As it goes in, push it in, down, and pop it in. And now the hard drive is installed. The next thing we will look at is the processor. As you can see, well, the processor here does come with a bit of a fan. I'm not a big fan of the fans. Ho ho ho, dad joke. Okay, so let's get the CPU. Pop it off. Cover. We have our processor here. These little slots here and here, they correspond to the board. So those little slots, there's a slot here and a slot here, which shows that those slots need to line up. So with those slots lining up, it goes right in there. Boom. And then we put the cover on, and then we lock it down in place. Okay. And that is the processor installed and the hard drive installed. Now, it does come with an Intel fan, and the Intel fan is probably fine. Okay, so that is okay. You can use that, but we have brought a different fan. One that should hopefully give us a little bit more performance when we are doing high CPU loads. So it keeps the processor a little cooler, and heat is a bad thing. So in the manual, you can see how we need to install it. And with this one, what we need to do, well, that's putting the paste on. But before we do that, we want to actually get the backing bolts on, so that we can have the mount points attached to the back, and then the attaching arms, so that we can actually bolt that down on when we're ready to do the paste. But we won't do our pasting until we get to this step, even though it's suggesting to do it on this step. But I don't want to turn the board upside down, etc., when I've got paste on the CPU. So let's this is just a different mounting mechanism. So after a quick check with clearances, because I just want to check the height here and here, I'm going to put it this direction so the airflow flows from these fans through here, and this pushes the air and this sucks the air. So that's out, that's that way, and these are that way. So the airflow will go that way, making it nice and cool. So as I was saying, this plate basically goes on here like that and protects dust getting in, our RAM in. Okay, so we have our CPU, which we'll mount in a little bit. Let's get some of our RAM in. As again, this is off to the side, so these can only go in one direction. Let's pop them in. Pop. Oh, I was nervous pushing these in. Alright, and then let's do stick 2. So this will be a 32 gig machine, which is plenty of RAM for what we're going to be doing. And put it on my round. Okay, so we now have our RAM installed, we have our hard drive installed, we have our CPU installed, but we have not yet installed our fan. So now it's time to get this into the case. And this is our case. We have fans here, here, here. The placement of the CPU fan, we want to split this direction so the airflow flows this way. And this fan is also pushing this way, and this fan is also pushing that way. So we want the air to flow through. That heat is taken up from the processor into this heat sink and then dispersed out the back. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add our motherboard in here, and we need to connect up the front panel. So you get these cables here, and these cables sort of connect up to the power button, etc. at the front. So, before we go too far, we need to look at the mounting the motherboard. Cursor, power supply, which will be the next thing to put in the case. So here's the face plate installed. Might have to push it up a little bit more. It just slides in the bottom here, and you just push it right up, and it stops dust getting in when the parts are up. Cap we've installed with the couple of screws that it took to actually put it in, so there's only 4 screws. We've got the case connectors, these connectors, we've got our faceplate just slid in, and now we need to install our motherboard. So the motherboard basically goes on these screws, and then they go in here, and they need to have, I can't remember how many of them is, but you need to basically have it all screwed in the appropriate holes in order for it to be aware and switch on. So let's get these screws in. So now we have our motherboard mounted with our screws, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have our memory in, our CPU, and our hard drive, our M2 hard drive. I've connected up the USB-C here. I've connected up the other USB and the front audio, as the front audio goes here, the USB goes there, and the USB 3 goes there. Now these can only go in one direction. This is blue and it's got a little nip, so it can only really go here. And these ones have got missing pins, and then a connector which is missing, so that they can also only go in one way. And the NEM USB matches the NEM down here, so it's not as difficult. It's more like a puzzle. Just make sure it's pushed down in and support the bottom of the board when you're doing it. Yeah, and now we just need to connect up the power, etc., to the correct sections. You can actually see the connectors there, and if you can read them, that's the front panel, and I'll tell you the hard drive and which ones to connect to. Yeah, so we basically connect the appropriate connector here to the appropriate name on that one. I'll plug in the power, the motherboard power, which then comes down and plugs in here. And now I will do the CPU fan power, which is another big one. So plug that in there, and the other one goes in up here. Do some cable management afterwards. Tidy these cables up. I had to take the RAM out just to get my hands in to screw the screws in a bit more. Keep it nice and tight. And I put an X with the paste like that before putting this on and connecting it up. Now this will also connect to the power. Here. And I will add the RAM back in. Yep. They also can only go one way. There we go. Nice and tight. And then this way too. Okay. Cooler is on. RAM is installed. The M2 hard drive is installed. It's mounted in the case, faceplate is on, this fan is connected up, these fans all come down and basically connect with one of these, so I'll power them directly off the power supply, so they'll basically always be running rather than dynamically running. Yeah, that is more or less it, folks. We just have to add our graphics card, which is our 1080 Ti, and then add some more power to the fans. And we are good to go. Alright, so we now have gaps down here. We just have to push these down to the side a little bit so that they don't get in the way. Now we will install this device. We'll do some more cable management on the future. So let's just get this graphics card in. And screwed in to hold it in place. Her to move on us. I don't know why I've genderized it, but still don't want it to move. I'll have the other one later. Now I will need to do more cable management to make sure that these are not touching, so I might pull these out and put those through the other side of the case. They need to stay. I might pop out and run it so it doesn't touch here, back up here and then out there, and all the other ones I'll push through these holes here and then back out here so that they go under the graphics card and that we've got nothing really touching the graphics card so it doesn't get too hot. So you can see now I've tidied up the cable management a little bit more. Some of the stuff I had running over, and I put them through these holes at the bottom. They come through the back, and then they come back out like these holes up here, and then come back out over the top. So now we have our
CPU and cooler mounted. We have our RAM. The fans are all connected up. We have our 1TB M2 drive in here. We have our 32GB of RAM. We have the USB 3 mount connected up. The other connections for the power buttons, etc., are under this graphics card. We've got a 1080 Ti powered by a Corsair 1050 Platinum. So this should be good. Let's do the test boot up. I have it connected up to the monitor. Turn the lights down a little bit and see if that what it looks like as well. So let's okay, that's looking good. That's looking good. Yes, we're in the BIOS. Perfect. So I do have that connected to the graphics card, which means that we are done with the physical build part, and we are now moving over to install the operating system. So let's get into that. Okay, so we have the PC built. Now time to install our operating system. And what we're going to do is we have a USB bootable drive, and we have Windows on this machine. So we're going to plug it in here, and we are going to boot. Gigabyte, F12 boot menu, USB, and Windows is installing. It's that simple. Accept the terms.
And that's it, folks. An i5 with 32 gigs of RAM, 1TB M2 hard drive, and the GeForce 1080 Ti. This is a great budget gaming option or useful for some machine learning. Either way, I hope I've demystified how easy it is to build a PC. Have a great day. It's ciao from me, Darren Rogan.